Horses are not programmable. You don't download a code into them
Yeah.
and then it just comes out that way. It is a literal journey of who am I and how am I communicating and how am I being understood? How is this lesson being taken? I always say this in communication. There's two ways to do it. One's very effective and one is what society is doing, right?
Mm,
First way is to listen to respond. And I think a lot of people train horses that way. It's like, you're doing this, so I'm going to do this.
oh, yeah.
And in
Very
fact,
common way to talk about it.
absolutely. And one of the things, the most common questions I get, you could break it down into this concept of what do I do if, right? If this happens, what do I do? Okay.
Yeah.
And if this happens, what do I do? I'm like, but it's not a code. That's not how it works. One big drawback of that is if you're always trying to go back to your database on what to do, if, right, the answers to it,
Uh-huh.
you're always going to be caught behind because it's searching, in other words, it's or buffering, right? It's like
Uh-huh.
the information isn't going to come up that fast. Instead, can become the leader that those horses really need. And if I can become the source of peace to those horses, then really there's going to be more than one way to get to that same spot.
There are healers on this planet with the power to soften the suffering of mankind, yet they have remained in the recesses of the world, abused, discarded, and labeled as trash. This is The Touch of a Mustang. I am your host, Shalise Clough, and I'm here to tell the story of wild horses, Mustangs, and the humans who are discovering and sharing their gifts while working to protect their well-being and preserve their spirit so this divine power won't be lost. Join us on this quest with the wild Mustang.
Thank you so much for joining the podcast today, Luke. We're glad to have you here. To start with, would you like to give kind of a quick introduction to people who might not know who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, thanks for the invite. We're excited about talking horses here. So I am Luke Reinbold. I currently live in the western part of New York State, which is not commonly thought of as horse country and things. And really, it isn't, but it's where I had grown up, and that's where we're at least right now. At any rate, enjoy riding the hills and things, and it's an area that a lot of people don't necessarily think of when they hear of New York State, as most people think about the other end, which is the city and all that. But, you can see no neighbors from my house in 360 degrees, and it's very hilly. Our county borders Pennsylvania, and we're right in the western end of the Finger Lakes. So at any rate, we horses and everything about it, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, great. Sounds beautiful. I know upper state New York and around the different areas outside the city, there's some really pretty country. So it's cool to hear people with horses in different areas. So tell us a little bit about how you got into horses and then moved into this is something that you do full time, how that all came about.
Sure. So originally I started at probably, about 8 years old. My grandpa was always like to drive horses. Growing up, that's what everything was horse drawn on the farm and everything that he did. And when I have an older brother, and he's pretty close in age to me, and we would always be going to grandpa's house and messing around with his team of horses, which they were like large ponies, small horse size. There's a mare and a gelding. My grandpa really was getting older, so he gave them to us. And since my brother was older and at the time larger than me, he took Pat. We called him Fat Pat. You can imagine why. But he was a quiet horse. And I got Firestar, who was also aptly named mare. And long story short, my brother and I just toured around all of the back country doing things that I'd like to think if my mother knew we were doing, probably would have been stopped. But at any rate, we all kinds of fun adventures. And then you fast forward a couple years, that same horse colicked and unfortunately had to be put down, and that devastated me to the point where I didn't ride a horse from that time at about age 10 until I was 21 years old. Just went into the sports and other things. But it was just kind of nagged on me, and I knew I missed it and kept getting nagged by that same brother to get back, just try it. And finally, so he would stop, I did, and realized I just really missed it. Dug into it, right? I saved up a whole bunch of money and bought this green broke paint horse and started making some mistakes. I ended up breaking a couple bones, including my back. But because I had no idea, as the saying goes, I didn't know what I didn't know. But I was learning, right? And I was learning as much as anything what not to do. And moving forward with that, all I knew is horses were showing me things. They were showing me things about who I was and what I needed to be and what I needed to change. And I'd always describe myself at that part of my life as an impatient young man with anger problems, and horses were showing me that. And which is probably why, in a lot of ways, that I had started running into some injuries and things, because I just didn't take the time that it actually took for those horses to learn the things that they needed, and myself at the same time. So I went to pouring everything I could, all the spare time I had, into horses and trying to learn the things, right? The ins and outs, the nuances of horsemanship. And at the same time, then I was just observing. I was watching horses interact. I was watching what they did, desperately trying to figure out what made horses tick. What were they about? Who are they? And so I took this job in the summertime, because it was the closest thing that I could find near me with horses. And it was a kids camp that gave trail rides. There was the aspect. So it was a wrangler position, as it's called. And we take out a lot of city kids and a lot of kids that didn't ride horses at all. And, it was rather boring riding, the whole nose to tail kind of thing.
Right.
But it was horses, right? So I would work all day in the paid position, but then even after hours, I was still riding other horses, just because, I couldn't get enough of it. And long story short, there as well, that's where I met a young lady who was a lifeguard, and she became my wife a year later. And through that, I met her father-in-law, obviously, and he became my biggest life mentor in business. And he had some knowledge with horses, but that was my passion. But he was, through some very wise decisions and counsel, I guess you could say, he made the dream that I had, because I couldn't hardly rub two nickels together, really, at that point in my life. And after this whole process is going along of working at the camp and things, the camp was downsizing, and in effect was eliminating my job. And my wife and I were going to move. We were going to go west, because to me that meant more horses, right? There's a lot more opportunities for that. But our first child was on the way, and my in-laws really supported us in everything, but didn't necessarily love the idea of that distance.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right. And so he came up with the idea. He said, "Hey, how would you like to go into business together?" And again, I knew I could provide ambition and work, and I would do that.
Energy, probably.
Energy, all that stuff. And not for nothing, nobody could outdo his energy, but
Yeah.
I could work, and I did that. But this meant the whole financial part of this was going to be up to him, right? Because I just didn't have it. So anyhow, he agreed, I agreed, and we purchased 80 acres of land and where we currently are. And it was nothing but overgrown farm fields and brush and, weeds, but the shell of a house. So we purchased that and went to building a house, trying to build a barn, building fence, clearing land. I mean, we were working 16, 18 hours a day to do all this. But I, at the same time, had to pay bills. So I began a career in law enforcement at that time. And the plan originally was to be in that for 2 years. And then we were going to go into horses full time. But, life happens. And with that, we were building, I was training horses, as much as I could between building everything. But I was learning a lot about people in that. And specifically, I worked in corrections and was learning about the tough to deal with people, and really the horses are the easy part, but humans, not so much. But through that, we had started competing in obstacle competitions and some anything that I could find with horses. And he encouraged me to, to keep following those dreams and to keep doing what we were looking to do. So at the time I found this clinic. Well, it was like, they called it a ride and learn. And it was where they would invite local people to do little demonstrations and whatever. And I begged the promoters for an hour of time so that I could talk about specifically obstacles and how I prepare horses for obstacles. And I can't imagine how much of a bumbling idiot I sounded like probably at the time, but they agreed. And that very first clinic, I showed up there, and my saddle at the time had a broken tree, and I knew it, but that's what I could afford. Right.
Right.
And we get through the clinic, which I have nothing to base this on. I don't know if it went well. I don't know if it went poor, right? Or anything. But I'm going through this. The company that put it on is the largest tack store, one of the largest in the country. It's Stagecoach West. So I ride for them now, ironically. And I'm walking through looking at all these saddles. There's Circle Y, there's Rainsman, right? All these saddles that are awesome, but I can't afford that. And this guy comes up to me and he says, "Hey, I watched your clinic." I'm like, oh man, what's he?
Here it comes.
Well, here it comes. Says, "Have you ever heard of Circle Y saddles?" Right? And I'm going, well, of course, they look awesome, right? And the guy says, "So how would you like to ride for Circle Y?" And this naive kid that I am at this time, I'm 20 nothing years old. I'm like, I don't even know what that means, right? Like, what does this mean? He says, "Well, here's what I want to do. What kind of saddles you like?" And I tell him some of the features that I could dream about. He says, "So this next week, a couple saddles are going to show up at your door." And again, I'm so naive. I'm like, "You can ship saddles?" I don't even know about any of this stuff, right?
Yeah. Not everything was shipped in those days, I would imagine.
Yeah, right. And I'm just, and understand this is the early days of the Clinton Andersons, John Lyons, Pat Pirellis, all this stuff that I am just digging into with I'm watching this stuff on VHS tape.
Right.
This isn't even YouTube's not out yet, right?
Yeah.
That's not even a thing. So anyhow, we sign our first contract with Circle Y and I get to build my own saddle and all these features. And I'm thinking this is the coolest thing, right? We're starting to do decent in some obstacle competitions and things and building a business. We're starting to train outside horses for clients and just really loving life. I mean, I have 2 sons at this point, young sons. This is moving forward. Learning everything I can about the nuances of business and that from my father-in-law. And then everything changed because on December 24th, 2009, my father-in-law was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
Mm.
And, this pretty much rocks our world, right?
Yeah.
Because this is, of course, it doesn't take long to figure out that's not a good kind of cancer. Not that there is one, but that's the bad. And, the kind of guy that he is, Jeff was his name, he was heartbroken that the doctor has to tell him on Christmas Eve that he has cancer, right? That's just kind of the guy that he was.
Yeah.
Well, you fast forward a little bit and everything seems okay. He's doing treatments on his days off, which he didn't really take days off, but you get the idea. And long story short, the following September 27th of 2010, he had passed away. And I mean, it rocked our world. We were supposed to be doing, we had plans. We were moving, right? And it totally took the wind out of our sails. And we just I call it turtling up, right? It's kind of like a turtle when their life happens and they're threatened, they just withdraw and kind of pull in. That's what we did. And I still remember this very vividly. It's like a dream. I was out in the barn and this idea, it was, I call him Dad, right? It's like, okay, it's time. And that was pretty clear. And he was the kind of guy that go through the things in life, right? But then when it's time, and we needed to get back at it. So we're well past that original 2 years that I planned on working in law enforcement. We're well past that. Now at this point, I've developed a career that most would love to have. I was a supervisor. They'd sent me through instructor school. So I taught in academies. I taught in-service personnel. They'd sent me through defensive tactics instructor school, which I use a lot of now. And I learned so much about the human's brain and how we react in high stress environments and what our body does, what our brain does through that. Things that I very much implement now in what I do. But through this, I've got that whole career, everything's going great, and we're trying to really start doing some clinics and go around. But, when you work a full-time job, you have to work around when you can get leave time and things.
Yeah, it's not easy.
And when you're trying to schedule clinics out, maybe 6 months or more out ahead of time, and you don't actually know if you can get that time off, this is starting to become a problem, right? So I'm still, in essence, working 2 full-time jobs. I would work the evening shift most of the time, so I would ride horses all day long until I had to leave for work, which would let me out at like 11 at night, and then we turn around and start all over again, right? So finally, I just decided, I've got to pick. It's not really doing either careers here justice. So we just decided that you can't keep one foot on the dock and one foot in the water. You got to make a choice, right? Either stay on the dock or jump. So we jumped, and 2017 went full time into the horses and never looked back. Since then, now my sons, there were still Mustang Makeovers in the Northeast, and my oldest son competed in 3 of those in the youth division when he was 8, when he was 9 and
Oh,
10, and then my younger son, the last one that they had in the Northeast, he was 8 and he competed. So we had done a couple horses for the adult version of that, and my sons did the younger version, which ended up really, it kind of got us through that. We met lots of people, made a lot of connections, and that was a pretty cool thing. And one of the horses, one of the Mustangs, is we had kept, and is now my oldest daughter's main horse. And I, in fact, have never actually ridden that horse because she's a little bit on the smaller side.
Yeah.
But that was a pretty fun experience. But fast forward a little bit, I'm still learning what as the saying goes, the more you know what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's been the pretty much a summary of my journey with horses. Now, you bump into that. I think it probably would have been 2021 or so. Social media is really starting to become a thing, right? And I had my business account on Facebook and that, which had, I don't know, at this time, 5,000 or 6,000 followers, which is decent. That's, somewhat respectable. But I'm riding horses every day, but never really thought about videoing stuff, right? Because to me, it didn't seem that interesting. It didn't seem like, to me, it was just the everyday, and I loved it, but I just never would assume that people would find it interesting. So at any rate, I decided one day there was a stump. Okay, just a regular stump from a tree that'd been cut off on the side of the road, on this dirt road. And the horse that I was riding, he only had probably, I don't know, not even a month's worth of riding. I was starting him to ride. Well, he had quite a reaction to this stump, and it looked kind of funky. It looked kind of weird. But I was like, well, you know what? I'll just video this. So I'm videoing this from my cell phone, from sitting on the back of this horse. And it's like a 3.5 minute video. Put it online. And it goes to 5,000 views, which at the time, a good video for me was like 2,000 views. But it goes to 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, 25,000 by that night. And I'm going, what is this? I don't even know. Like,
what's going on?
What's going on? Well, by the couple days, it's 100,000 and 250,000 views, right?
Wow.
And it just keeps going. And people I get all these comments. They're like, this is awesome. More videos, please. More. And I'm going, really? Like, you guys are finding this stuff interesting?
Yeah.
So, well, if you're finding it interesting, I guess I'll just start videoing it, right? So I start doing that, and my Facebook page is starting to blow up, right? It's now at 10,000 views. Now we're starting to get these messages and things, and now we can get monetized, right? And then I'm like, you actually can get paid to do this?
Right.
This is crazy, right? So we just keep putting this stuff out there, and next thing you know, I'm getting messages from, literally all of South Africa, from Europe, from Canada, right? All over the United States, from Australia. And people are asking more and more, like, well, we'll just keep doing that. So in the last, I don't know, it's 2.5, almost 3 years, we've gone from training horses full time, which I love, to now I can't train horses to that same extent because the travel schedule doesn't allow it, because I'm just, on the road doing clinics all over the country. And soon that'll be, Europe, Australia, and all that stuff. So it has been a crazy ride. And this is basically a whole summary of what has happened there. So that's kind of the story in a nutshell, to where now we are. Still baffles my mind that people actually want to hear what I have to say about horses, because I came from a guy with really no formal training in horses, but a desire to just understand, right? And to learn the things that I needed to learn and to get over myself, because when I was the impatient, as I described myself, the impatient young man with anger problems, I had to understand that horses didn't owe me anything,
True.
right? And sometimes the slower you go, the faster you get to your destination.
Yeah, definitely the case sometimes.
And I just needed to learn that sometimes. Well, let me tell you a story. When I was when I still worked at the jail, there was a captain there he was only months away from retirement, and it was at the end of our shift, and a bunch of the folks are just kind of shooting the breeze, and he walks in to make some copies or something in booking, and he hears all of us talking about have this long to retirement, this long. Of course, most of us are decades, not months. But he did. This is the kind of guy that didn't talk a lot, but when he did, usually you should probably listen to it. And he says, guys, don't be so quick to get to the destination that you miss the journey getting there. And those words, that advice, I have taken and put it in a lot of areas, right? And it certainly applies to the horses, and it's don't be so quick to get to the quote finished product that you miss the really cool moments with those horses, those maybe aha moments, as you might call them, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's reminded me in life that sometimes of course, I still have to remind myself every day, but
Yeah.
just slow down.
Yeah. It's a hard thing to remember in our world, and everything is often outcome based. And, when are you going to get where? And once you get there, then you'll feel great. And a lot of times you're right. The beauty of life is really in, striving for these things that we want, and, working with our horses. One thing that I think is cool about you kind of becoming so available to people online is it really shows how people want to also learn and be able to do that for their horses.
Sure.
And which I think is neat, because I kind of mentioned to you, a lot of times I think people send it to a trainer and then it'll be perfect. We'll be at the end, and we can just have this great horse ride. And that's not been my experience. Like the best way to do it is to really learn the horse for yourself.
Right. Well, it's exactly the case. Is horses are not programmable, right? Like, you don't download a code into them,
Yeah.
and then it just comes out that way. It is a literal journey of who am I and how am I communicating and how am I being understood, right? How is this lesson being taken? And trying to really, truly, this is because I always say this in communication, there's two ways to do it. One's very effective, and one is what society is doing, right?
Mm.
First way is to listen to respond. And I think a lot of people train horses that way. It's like, you're doing this, so I'm going to do this.
Oh, yeah.
And in
Very
fact,
common way to talk about it.
absolutely. And one of the things, the most common questions I get you could break it down into this concept of, what do I do if, right? If this happens, what do I do? Okay.
Yeah.
And if this happens, what do I do? I'm like, but it's not a code. That's not how it works, because really, and one big drawback of that is, if you're always trying to go back to your database on what to do, right, the answers to it, you're always going to be caught behind. Because, like, it's searching, in other words, or buffering, right? It's like the information isn't going to come up that fast. So if I instead can become the leader that those horses really need, and if I can become the source of peace to those horses, then really there's going to be more than one way to get to that same spot, right?
Yeah.
Just because I might be able to get the horse to do it this way, that doesn't mean it's the right way, or maybe I should say the only way.
Yeah.
It just means that is a way, right? So it's no different than a GPS. If you're putting in your ending destination, a lot of times you have more than one option of which way to take, right?
Yeah.
And as long as you're getting there, that's ultimately the point. Like, my journey getting this horse to the spot, maybe it's the straighter option, maybe there's more turns. But oftentimes on all the turns, that's where the more scenic and beautiful scenery actually is, right?
Yeah, I agree with that.
So at any rate, with that, I try to be, and that's why now I don't actually train the horses. I'm trying to teach the people.
Yeah, I love that.
That's hopefully we can make more impact and affect more horses because we've shown that way in other ways to more people.
Yeah. And when you're talking about people saying, like, what do I do if this happens? I assume that's when they're getting the big reactions. What do I do if they start bucking? What do I do if they start bolting? And that's such a smart way to look at it, that like you are looking like the outcome has already almost happened. Like it's kind of already happened. You got to the point you don't want to be, and you need to go back a little bit and be like, wait, we don't want to get to the what ifs. We kind of want to be able to learn and see that before we're getting to those strong reactions where the horse is trying to communicate, and strengthening that response and method of communication.
No doubt. And, and a lot of that, I think it comes back to we as humans do this to humans. And I see a lot of humans do this with horses too. And that is we question the intent, right? Like, in other words, I hear all the time where people will be like, my horse just wants to be in control. No, they don't. Right. And it's not about that.
It's not a motivation for horses.
It really isn't. It really isn't. But it's so many times like, horses don't have egos. They don't have agendas. Literally, all horses are looking for is peace. They don't think about money, power, status. They don't think about retirements. I joke with people. Do you ever have a horse try to help you put up hay in the summertime for winter?
Yeah.
You don't see that. They'll come over and eat hay off the wagon. But they're not. That's not how they think. Right?
Yeah.
They live in the now, and you can't, as humans, always do that. Like, it's snowing outside. You have to do the things. I have to make sure I have firewood for the winter, right? I have to do those types of things. So it's not exactly the same. But if we question the intent, we're always, or assume, maybe I should say the worst intent.
Yeah.
We're always opening up ourselves and the relationship for problems.
Yeah. That's really interesting, because there are a lot of those assumptions, those ways that we interpret what the horse is doing. And I think you're right that most of the time it's negative. It's not that, oh, the horse is trying to find peace, trying to find that equilibrium. It's usually they're disrespectful, they're misbehaving, they're stubborn, they don't listen, things like that.
Sure. And that was one of the things that I hear that's happening all the time. And, being totally, I try to be as transparent and open and honest in all things that I do. But when I started my journey, I learned from some people, and I'm not referring to, the Clinton Anderson and the John Lyons and all those. I'm talking to more the local, whatever people. But I grew up in a world of, it was the smack them. It was the like, show them you're who's boss, right?
Yeah.
All that's literally what I learned from people that I respected at the time. And I'm not proud of that, right? I'm not stating that's the way it should be. I'm just saying that's what I learned, right? And at the same time, I've chosen and understood now that there are better ways, but at the same time, I can't live in the guilt and all of that of those things, because that's the best I knew at the time.
Yeah.
Right. All I can now do is go, okay, there's better ways. I'll do that.
Yeah. And I think those are the ways that a lot of us learned. Those are the phrases a lot of us learned. Tell us more about how that kind of evolved from when you were, breaking your back on the horses and breaking bones to now your approach with horses and the way that you look at things.
So I think so much of it then was about being the boss. It really was. And because of that, the thought process then was about tell them, right? But there wasn't a communication that was a two-way street, right? So let me give you an example. I use this illustration all the time, is I don't believe reins and the use of reins should be a one-way communication tool. I think that should be, it's almost like a phone line instead, where the communication can go both ways. Okay. So let me give you an example of that. You can feel braciness, right? And what I mean by braciness is it's a leaning against pressure is probably one of the
tension.
best. Yep. Which is causing through the cause of this is kind of going off on getting deeper to explain something else, but it is kind of a deep conversation, right? But what I'm saying is the mental braciness that horses have directly correlates and is the cause of the physical braciness, right? So in essence, if a horse is being bracy, that is a symptom. I want to figure out what is the cause, right? So like I just I reshared a video that I'd done a couple of years ago about a horse on my Facebook page. And it always, this is one of the types of videos that always gets huge reaction, because it shows me working a horse through his braciness and his anxiety, right? So the anxiety was causing him physically to be very bracy in the face, right? So in other words, he pulling against the rein, pushing against it. His shoulder was just trying to push out through what I'm asking for. And I explain it in real time and work through this. Every time I share that video, it goes way over 500,000 views. I mean, it's gone. I don't even know how many views it's got at this point. But the reason is because it resonates, right? It's relatable to people. So
Absolutely.
what that's showing is the horse doesn't want to be there. The horse doesn't want to be anxious. The horse doesn't want to be nervous, but they don't know what else to do. And this is exactly where a lot of people then assign the negative intent to the horse. He's being an knucklehead. He's being a knothead. He's just trying to be in control. And this is where that was my original thought process. That's what I was taught, right? But now I have learned through a lot of trial and error that that's not actually what's happening. The horse is not at peace because it doesn't know how. It doesn't understand where the peace can actually be found. And that's my job to help them show that, right? The horse will still have to be accountable to those choices, but I'm trying to show the horse how and where they can find peace if they, and every horse is going to pick that, right? If they actually know where it is. A horse that's right in the head is going to choose that. So and if they are not, then it's up to me to keep explaining it until they get it. And I'm not in a hurry anymore to do that. I used to be like, the one phrase we've all heard, move their feet, move their feet. Okay. And I agree with that in some ways, but at the same time, why and how are you moving their feet? Right. And which is as much of an important component as, well, just move their feet. Right.
Absolutely.
So again, through so much trial and error, I try to tell people this too, is I hope that everybody frees themselves up enough to make mistakes, because
that's a huge one.
I think it's immensely huge, because if you're not, I literally believe this is my motive or my idea every day, is if I'm not making mistakes, I'm probably not trying hard enough. Right.
Yeah, but not learning, not doing new things. Yeah,
absolutely. Because this has been the epitome of my life's journey, is making mistakes. And it's very interesting coming back to my father-in-law, because growing up, failure was something that was not allowed. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, it was an interesting spin, because it's not that you just kept going and put all of your effort into not failing. Instead, it was just don't start it. And it's stifling, right? You just can't, that's not, I mean, not a good way to look at it. But my father-in-law said something to me one time, and it totally rocked my world in a good way. And it changed everything about my approach since. And he said, the conversation was something like this. I don't even know what we were talking about. I don't remember it. But he said, there's no such thing as failure. And I'm like,
yes, there is. I've been told my whole life.
What do you mean there's no such thing as failure? He says, no, there isn't. He says, there's no such thing as failure. There's just the way you now realize didn't work. And I thought about that. And I thought about that probably for a couple of days. And honestly, that's changed everything for me. Because, for an example, I don't know if you've ever heard this story, but WD-40, right? The simple lubricant, whatever.
Right.
WD-40, it stands for water displacement, and 40 is the 40th try that they had used to get the position right? Or, you could use the example of Edison and the light bulb. Electricity, all those things were tried multiple times. Yeah. Doesn't mean all of those first tries were failures. All depends on how you look at it, right? And so to me, that journey of going from that initial starting my horsemanship journey, where I just did some stupid things. For instance, when I broke my back, that was just because I rode the horse in a way that he was not ready for.
Yeah.
He was not prepared for it. So long story short, I had a collision with a fence.
Oh, man.
Right. And that was basically when I was having these wrecks. It was because I wasn't preparing the horses for what they might see. And in the law enforcement training and going through the instructor schools and things, that's what really taught me the concept of, when you're teaching, you have to break it down into steps that the student will understand, and then those steps you can keep building on it, and it gets more and more complex and things, right? I mean, in so many cases, you have to remove the problems that are hindering learning, right? And then sometimes, and that might be, for instance, if the room is really cold, people can't focus on learning because they're distracted. right? And at the same point, once you start getting those things factored in, now a lot of times the practical education and the practical sides of learning are now you're going to put them in situations where you can continue to build on that, right? So that's why I've incorporated so much of colt starting and stuff that I do is on the job training. I've already put the steps in place and teaching them how to give to that rein and yield off my legs and things. But now I might bring a cow into the equation and I'm teaching them, hey, this is why we're turning so that you can actually effectively do your job. And it's like you see those light bulbs go off in those animals to now they're going, totally makes sense. So I don't have to drill it to death now, right? And just do the same thing over and over. I've taught them those steps. Now we're doing it, moving into the practical application. So it's so much less negative, right? And one other component with this, because it was interesting when I was working at the jail, right? It's all about control. You have to control the inmate.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, that can get out of hand, which means you can lose control of the unit that they lived in, which then you could lose control of the jail. Right. And in some ways, this is how I also grew up. I have great parents, by the way. I mean, no insult to them in any way.
Correct.
But in some ways, and this is how they grew up. You do what I
That's
said.
what they knew. Yeah.
Because I said so. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a component to that. When a toddler sees the ball running towards the road and they want to chase it, it's
Right.
you need to stop now.
Right.
That is a component. But then the other component is you have to explain to them after the fact why we don't chase the ball into the road.
Yeah.
Right. At a level that they'll understand as a toddler. But at any rate, when I was really getting serious about horses, I could make them do it. Right. In fact, this was another aha moment for me. I worked with a man, actually, Jesse Westfall was the former husband of Stacy Westfall.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't know me from Adam, which was fine because I went to take a lesson with him and he says, all right, I want you to go out and just warm up your horse. He was still, he'd just done a lesson with somebody else and he was finishing that up. He says, warm up your horse and I'll be with you in just a minute. I said, okay. So I'm out there and I'm loping circles with this young horse. And I thought these circles were like really circly. These are like good circles. And when it's my turn, he says, okay, I can see that you're a talented rider. Okay, there's the buildup. Great. Awesome. But there's always a but, right? Or however, he says, you can make a horse do it, but does the horse understand why they're doing it? And when he first said that to me, I'm like, I don't know, like what difference does it make?
Yeah. Why does it matter?
Why does that matter? And he said, and through that, he started working through some things and that really stretched me. And I got to the end of that lesson and my wife goes, so what'd you think? How was it? And I'm like, I really had to, I'm the kind that thinks about things later and breaks it down. Oftentimes when I'm cleaning stalls or doing something like that.
Yeah, it's a perfect time.
Perfect time, solve all the problems. But at any rate, I needed to hear that a lot because what I was starting, and this is so fascinating, I was starting to, this was a young mare that I really thought a lot of. And when I started her under saddle, I think she thought a lot of me. But we're about ride 45 when I met with him. And what I'd noticed the last week or two before I met with him, she started becoming really hard to catch in the pasture. And that was very uncharacteristic of her. It's like, what is going on? But I didn't know. And I used to been taught, or when I first started, I would try to fix the symptoms. Well, the symptom is the horse doesn't want to be caught. That's the symptom. So I'm going to teach it to be caught. And we'll come back to that. But what I then figured out through my whole approach that Jesse told me is I started letting the horse make a mistake. And when those mistakes happen, I would fix it, show what I hoped for again, and then leave her alone and then give her the chance to make mistakes. So what I started figuring out is, hey, we can still do the circles, but I don't have to micromanage every step.
Yeah.
Right. And it took about a week or so. And it was the coolest thing. One day I went out to catch this horse in the pasture and she came up to me again. So instead of treating the symptom, which was a horse that wasn't wanting to be caught, I had really addressed the problem that was creating it, right? Which was me telling the horse to do everything.
Yeah. The environment she knew she'd be going into if she got caught.
So that I think is a pretty good illustration of, that was the epitome of why I'm doing things now, because I allow horses to make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And show them again, hey, let's do it this way because it's where you can find that peace, right? And now the horses want to, they don't feel they have to, and they don't feel like they're going to get the proverbial beat up if they do the
Hmm.
quote wrong thing.
Yeah. That mindset shift from you have to succeed the first time or don't try or failure is such a bad thing. Shifting that to where, mistakes are a stepping stone. That's how
Sure.
we're learning things like that. I think that is such a key piece to horsemanship because a lot of those times when you're getting those strong reactions, I think a lot of it probably comes out of fear of messing up. So much tension to try and make it perfect and right and to not make a mistake, to not let the horse make a mistake, to micromanage them so tightly. And there's just so much tension between both parties because they're so fearful of a mistake. And, like you say, that's how you learn. That's how you're progressing as if you're making mistakes.
And I see this play out with people so much where realistically people all know that the room for error when you're talking about the size and the strength and the power of a horse really is, it's not huge, right? There's not a lot of room there for error.
Yeah.
And because of that, it turns a lot of riders into the reactors.
Yeah.
They're always just trying to react to what the horse is doing. And instead of the whole other approach, right, which we've kind of just outlined and talked about, that literally changes everything,
Yeah.
which is right, as the questions typically, what do I do if? What do I do if? In most every case, my answer to those questions are going to be the leader the horse needs. Be the leader. Like there's more ways to handle this than what maybe would be my first inclination or choice, but they can all have a successful outcome, right?
Mm,
So that's why I try to really impart with people is get those horses to follow your leadership and understand that you've got their back in situations. You're not going to micromanage everything because if you micromanage a horse, you'll always have to micromanage them. It'll never change, right?
hmm
And teach those horses that it's okay. We'll work.
Yeah.
We are a team here. We will work this out, right? But most all of those same things that people are dealing with, they're actually causing it because of the tension and the anxiety in their mind.
Yeah. That is also another just another huge shift. And it is high stakes, right? Like you can get hurt on a horse. The thing that's ironic or however you want to put it is that the more you try to go from that approach of control, the more dangerous I think that it becomes.
Yep.
Because at some point you can't control a horse. They are bigger than most people. We can, have some aids to help us kind of keep them more in control. But if it comes to the point where you can't control them, then what? And then it really does become high
Yep.
stakes where, when horses are in their peaceful state, they're very gentle, very calm, very non-reactive.
Sure. Well, and it's really, I made a video one time where I'm out riding my one mare, Liberty, and I'm riding her out. It's through the fall leaves, and we're just out there, and I'm riding her bridleless, which that's a whole nother topic, which can get people all wound up and all those other things, right? But the topic of this was control is actually an illusion,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's totally something that we think we have it, and that's one of the biggest things that people when they get fired up when they see that is, well, you don't have control with that horse.
Mm,
Like
yeah.
you don't actually have control ever. Like if a horse wanted to kill us, we'd be dead. That's just the reality of it.
hmm
But like you just said, they're actually very peace. They're at peace. They're extremely gentle. I mean, they can be more gentle than anything, and they're huge, right?
Right.
We've all seen that when they interact with kids or whatever else. But so many times you think, well, more control, and oftentimes these same people. So because they can't let go of the anxiety and the fear, our own mental braces, right? Do we go to a bigger bit and we're just choking up on them, and that works for a while until it doesn't. So then we go with a bigger bit, and eventually you're out of bit options. So then what do? Well, then we tie their head down, right? And we force them in this position, but we're under control, right? We've
Yeah.
got under our control, and it's just that's just not the way it goes, right?
Yeah.
And it's very triggering when people see me riding without a bridle at times. I mean, I've got ridiculous comments and messages from people that is, I mean, it would, I'm ridiculous,
Yeah.
but
It can get wild out there. Huh.
for sure.
That's so interesting. And the correlation to how we interact with our world at large, I think is pretty significant. I think there's a good chance if we are one of those writers who is always seeking control, probably a good chance that's what we're doing in our life outside of horses as well, so that we
Yeah,
really feel like we can control everything. And like you said, it's an illusion. We have no control, not no control. We have minimal control. We have some control, the way we behave, but we can't always control the outcome.
for sure. And that's such a deep topic, really.
It is.
It's immensely deep, but that's the reality because sure. And a lot of times, I've had some real heart to heart conversations with some folks who really got to look at that reality. We all have our things. We all have our issues.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all figuring this life out together for sure.
Sure. And a lot of times those folks that feel they need to have the most control of the horse have had a wreck,
Mm,
in fact, this is a fascinating concept. Some of the biggest thing about people that have pushed back when they see me riding bridleless are because they've seen some horrific things from horses.
yeah,
So they almost try to compensate and come back in a larger way. And they assign or are painting a large brush stroke with this one over lots of things that it's unrelated, right? But
yeah.
it's still in their head. So they're just assuming the worst in the rest of the situations when, that's just not fair baggage to put on that horse or this situation.
Yeah. And one thing I noticed just as you were talking is the way that your language is different than a lot of the language you might hear in horse training when you were talking about teaching the horse and helping them to learn. I think just that switch from changing the way we are thinking about what we're actually doing can make such a significant difference because if you go from it's my responsibility to teach the horse how to interact with the human world. If we change that from I've got to control them, I have to show them who's boss, they need to respect me. Very different approaches just by that foundation that is set with language and the way that we are seeing animals in our lives.
Yeah, no doubt. And I appreciate you saying that because that to me is one of the most important things. At the end of the day, right? When, not to be morbid, but at the end of my days, I don't want to be known as the horse trainer. I want to be known as a man that was compassionate to both horses and humans and that cared, right? About because like horses don't have egos. They don't care what our names are. They don't care what we drive. They don't care about bank accounts. All they literally care about is how do they treat me? How does he treat me? Right? What happens when he's around? That's literally all they care about. So
Yeah.
that is, yeah, it's a horrible thing. Egos are. They really. And I do want to be known as the person who's different, right? I'll tell people, listen, I might not be for everybody,
Yeah.
right?
Or
And
people might not be ready for that approach also. I think someone could not be ready for it today and then maybe has those insights and those lessons and can see the wisdom in it.
sure, because I tell this to my wife all the time. I'm like, and I'm really glad you didn't meet me when I was 18, 20 years old, 21, because she would have not liked me.
Yeah.
I'm completely convinced of that.
Yeah.
Shouldn't we all just try to be reaching the better version of us, right? And out of that flows all that we do,
Yeah.
right? How we treat people, how we treat animals, just being better.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful reality that we can change. We aren't stuck wherever we're at. We aren't stuck in that place of fear from the accident. If we're ready to, look at new ideas, take in new information, question the way that we've been taught to approach the world, because most of us are approaching it from all we've known. It's not like we are consciously choosing, like, I want to approach it out of fear and control. That's what we've learned how to approach it.
Sure.
So it is a beautiful thing that we can change, that we don't have to be the same people that we were yesterday. And we can make a mistake with our horse and they're so forgiving. We can go back and use a new method. And like you talked about with your mare, suddenly she wanted to be with you again because of changes that you'd chosen to make.
This is a saying I'll tell people oftentimes when I sense that they're running up against some guilt or whatever. And I'm like, just remember that horses have forgiven us for mistakes we haven't even made yet.
Yeah.
And when you really think about that, it's such a foreign concept because humans don't do that to humans.
Mm-mm. No,
Right? We do not
we
forgive.
like to hold on to stuff.
Sure. We hold on to it so heavy. And because of that, a lot of humans can't forgive themselves for what we were just talking.
Yeah, that is very true. All the output that we are putting in the world, it's most heavily directed towards ourselves.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And that to me is, Warwick Schiller did this thing that was, it even factors into moving into like some judgmental ideas, because really that all you can boil back down to, where we're assuming that people are judging us, right? Or
Mm,
we're not forgiving. And that whole thing, it's kind of mixed together, but did this exercise where people who think that they're not judgmental, like, actually go out and ask, hey, how many judgmental thoughts do you have? And I think he does it with like pebbles in your pocket and you can switch them around, whatever. But go to the airport, or worse, go to Walmart, right?
right.
And we go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that they would wear that. I can't believe they would have their hair like that. I can't believe they would say this. I can't believe, right? All these things are judgmental thoughts.
Hmm.
And I've seen some people that, I mean, this is one of the biggest things I run into, is folks that have had shown horses in some way significantly.
Hmm.
It's the idea of, well, people are going to think this, they're going to think that. And ultimately I go, so
Yeah.
where's your horse?
Mm,
Right? If you're interacting with your horse, that is what matters.
hmm.
Right? In showing, it's a fine thing, right? Like I'll do that again someday. But and really in that aspect, you're opening yourself up for judgment, because that's why they even call it a judge.
Right. That's the whole purpose of going there, is to see if you're doing it right or not. Yeah.
That's the whole point. But I even have people come to clinics and they're so worried about what other people are thinking.
Yeah.
Right. And I get it. That's part of probably a maturity at some point, where we just go, yes, I'm not worried about it. Like, if you don't like me, then if I'm not doing
Okay.
anything morally or ethically wrong, that's
Yeah.
a you problem. That's not a me problem.
Yeah.
Right. But at any rate, that forgiveness and that grace to move past all this and the judgmental ideas, that's a big deal.
And you talked about wanting to be known for compassion. And I think that's something that is so needed within the horse world and just the world in general. I think as a population, everybody is so scared of failing, so scared of people seeing their inadequacies and where they're not doing it right. And so we are just reacting fear based and always worried, a constant worried state.
Sure.
When we can feel that compassion, grace, or realize like your horse will forgive you. You can make a mistake and tomorrow you can fix it or learn a
Right.
new way to do it. Just that idea is, I think, really powerful, because there is a lot of language and ideas in the horse world that's like, don't ever do this, or this is always going to happen if you do this. And the reality is, not really. Like it's a constant interaction between people and experiences and the world around you and the horse. Like horses are different. And so we don't have to be so scared that, we're going to mess up.
Yeah.
You've talked yourself, you teach people now, but it's because you've messed up and then gone back and looked at it and reassessed it and seen how you can do things differently, that you've been able to find new and different ways of doing it than
Right.
what I definitely learned growing up, what you learned growing up. So it's really great to have those voices of compassion and grace that, yeah, like it's okay that you're not perfect. That's what life is being not perfect, not never failing.
Right. Because it's just not even reasonable to think that we're never going to make a mistake.
Yeah.
Just that idea now it's absurd.
Yeah. And probably why it's so painful for us, because we have this expectation we have to be perfect. We need to know it right. We need to
Sure.
never fail. And then we are going to. So, then we feel inadequate and we react out of fear and we try to protect ourselves.
And I think there's a lot of reasons why we might feel inadequate in things, or that we have to be perfect, or whatever. But I've really come to grips with this fact of, in some ways, not all of the reasons, but a large portion of them are because we're just not humble enough to
Mm,
allow ourselves not to be perfect.
yeah. Yeah. Going back to the ego, right?
Right? Exactly. Which is why I am, try to be immensely transparent with people, whether it's a video that I'm doing or whether I'm having a face-to-face interaction. It's like, I try to, like, I am a real person, right? It's a bizarre thing to where my career now is going in places that I could have never dreamed. Right.
Mm,
That's only beginning to even fully materialize. But this is all, I've never been here.
hmm.
Right? So
Right.
it's a literal one step in front of the other. And I make a lot of mistakes. Like, I forget to get back to people. I'm not intentionally doing that. It's just my mind works in different ways, right? And I'm learning what my shortcomings are, trying to address those and get the help where I need it, right? But again, that's the exact picture of horsemanship.
Yeah.
Exact picture of life.
And it really goes back to what your father-in-law, I think it was, shared with you that, or maybe it was in your work in law enforcement, that it really is the journey that is where we should be. That we have in mind this destination, but the reality is every time we get to that new spot, we're starting again, like figuring it out again. And like you say, it's our first time experiencing this world under these circumstances.
Sure. It even goes into parenting. Like I've told we have 4 kids total, 2 boys,
That's great.
18 and well, he's almost 17, turned 17 here pretty quick. And then a 14-year-old and 11-year-old daughters. And we try to tell them all, like, please remember, I haven't actually been parents. My wife and I, we haven't been mom and dad here. We haven't been parents to teenagers before.
Yeah.
And
That was
then,
a fun one to figure out.
indeed, and then we were parents to teenage boys, but then now the girls. And
Yeah.
that's a whole different ballgame.
Right. And again, even different personalities. You
Different,
think you
all
have it
it's
figured out, and then there's some different variable.
all
Same with
different.
horses. Yeah.
So we try to give them the grace that they've never been that age before either.
Yeah.
You've never been parents that age.
Yeah.
And we really try to own the same thing with them. Like, we'll make mistakes.
Mhm.
We understand you'll make mistakes. We're going to do our best to give you grace in that. You need to fix some of the things if you keep doing it, but
Yeah.
we understand that, and the same rules apply to us as parents too.
Yeah.
The whole thing is the horses and horsemanship and all of this in life. This is why I say all the time, I am so thankful to God that horses have come into my life
Yeah.
and helped me become or be on the path of getting towards the destination of where I'm trying to go, and knowing that sometimes the journey getting there will be a little messy, and
Yeah.
it's life.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we like to look at ourselves as their teachers, but when you go into it in that way with some grace, they really end up being our teachers. They're like, hey, this is a place where you got to get yourself together a little better, which is pretty amazing experience to have. Well,
Sure.
I feel like we could keep talking for a while. I unfortunately have to run in a little bit, but maybe we'll be able to do it again sometime and dig
Absolutely.
into some deeper stuff again. In the meantime, tell everybody where they can find you, what you might be able to offer them with their horsemanship, all that good stuff.
Sure. So mostly we do a lot on Facebook, Loop Rapid Horsemanship. Also, we do have a lot more training type based content on YouTube. That is getting an upgrade, kind of overhaul. Our website is as well. We have some really fun things coming up. I'm writing a leadership course
Oh, cool.
and lots of other courses that, again, factor into my law enforcement background, but also with horses is the specific focus. But the
Mm,
both can relate things that I've learned through, working with people and the ways that I have. That's coming. This is all going to be some of it will be subscription based stuff, but we have so many hundreds of videos out that we just hopefully can help people. Those are continuing to come. And we also have a really fun project we are going to be doing this summer, where we are going to be touring the western states, Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, probably getting into Idaho, South Dakota, all of that. And this is going to be a format that really tells the story of our family is going to be part of it, and an adoption, because we did actually adopt our oldest daughter, which then factors into, the Mustang experiences and
mm,
all of that.
yeah.
Telling the whole story of that and digging into that a lot more, but also the same attributes that we just started hitting on with horses is going to be explained, and how God certainly blessed us and gave us horses as an illustration on how we can live better lives. And that will also be on YouTube and things that will be coming out later this year. So yeah, we have so many things coming down the pike that we are super
Yeah.
excited about.
Lots of great resources. Those sound exciting. I'll definitely be checking into some of those. And I just want to thank you for being here and, sharing your voice. I think a lot of us feel like there's a better way to live our life with horses. And so to have those voices that are saying like, yeah, you can do it a different way and you can go from a peaceful angle and go in as a teacher, I think really helps people to find their confidence and be able to do that for themselves. And when you're talking about offering grace to your kids and how it's like, yeah, we've also been here. When we can learn to do that for ourselves, we have so much more capacity to do it for other people when we're not constantly trying to protect ourselves, but we're able to see like, we're doing this, we're figuring it out, and it's okay that it's not perfect.
Right.
And so thank you for your voice out there and for all the resources that you provide. I think it's a huge asset to people who have horses and want to have a good, peaceful life with them.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for joining us and learning about horses that heal and the humans who help them. We hope you'll continue with us on this journey. We'd love for you to subscribe on your favorite platform and follow The Touch of a Mustang on any of the major social media outlets. Please share with your friends, anyone who loves horses, or anyone who might be struggling and could benefit from this message. If you have felt the healing power of horses or help them in their divinely appointed mission, please reach out. We want to hear your story. As we say goodbye, always remember that the horse is always there to help you heal.